And doobly doobly dop, we are now live, hopefully.
Woo!
So, welcome back, everybody, to the second, well, it's the second episode of the dark art of audio engineering, but really it's kind of like episode 3 because of the shenanigans that happened last time.
Two and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
the
nah,
stream
nah,
died.
this is episode 2. The last one was episode 1.5. And
Nice stepping.
of course, we have the great and powerful Dr. Eddie here again, and we also have CJ.
Howdy.
Fucking good to have you here, and we're back to talk about. Uh, what's up, Shane? Shane saying he feels lied to because this stream started at 5:02.
Oh,
Ah,
So
close enough for live
we
TV.
yeah, I mean, I'm coming from DH Thorne's live streams, and normally those don't start until like at least 10 minutes after, or fucking half hour like last time. That was fucking madness.
progress.
Yeah. So last time we left off on tube amps and well, specifically tubes and distortion, which is completely foreign to me. Actually, Shane knows a thing or two about those. He was the guy with the tube amps. I was just the fucker with the little line 6 spider solid drive, fucking awful piece of garbage.
I think it's Line 6 who made, I could be wrong. There's a company that makes inline quarter-inch, like sound like your favorite guitarist. They have like a Brian May that you literally just plug your guitar cord in one side and then the other side in your amp or your direct box, and you sound like Brian May, theoretically.
Like an Axe Effects or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say
And it's literally just a cruddy digital audio converter in there that they've just burned in a set of settings. So
I I can't really talk shit about the Axe effects and those digital modeling things. Like, cause
Never.
like as a producer, I love the idea of having those tools. I think what gets me is the people who want to like in between each song live on stage, just let me dial in all the correct settings. Just no.
well, that was my thing. Is I'm looking at these and like for what you would pay for one of these, you could buy a decent plugin for your laptop that will do all of these.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, so tubes, right?
Tubes. YouTube.
Tubes are amplifiers, right? So a tube actually amplifies. So if you remember our waveform, the amplitude is the vertical height. It's your y-axis. And all a tube does is the same thing a transistor does, which it takes a little short wave, like the kinds you get off of a guitar, with just the pickups, right? And it makes it taller. So it's louder, so you can hear it.
Yeah.
And the way it does this is by you have 3 active components inside a tube. You have an emitter that you heat up, right? And then you have a collector that's sitting out by the glass that isn't heated up. And the magic of that is that if you have a heated piece of metal and you apply a voltage to it in a vacuum, hence vacuum tube, it's like a light bulb, right? Um,
Yeah.
electrons will fly off the emitter and get caught by the catcher. And what makes it an amplifier is that you put a grid in between them, right? And that grid is charged with an electrostatic field. And so as the voltage, you apply the signal to the grid. So as the voltage goes up and down, that field gets stronger or weaker, and it permits more or less of the electrons flying across the gap. And so what you get on the other side is exactly the same waveform, just taller, and it's actually also phase reverse, but we deal with that passively.
Yeah, that
Um,
non-issue.
yeah, well, and if you ever catch me, I still do this sometimes. So because I come from a power background, so like AC, sometimes I will say phase reversed and 180 degrees out of phase as if they're the same thing, because on AC power, they are 180 degrees out of phase is the same thing as phase reversed, but in audio, they are not the same.
Oh,
Because an electrical current in your wall, AC current, is perfectly regular.
It makes it confusing with the two different.
Yeah, so if you ever catch me saying things like,
we'll be able to discern
if
it.
you ever hear me say 180 degrees out of phase, just smack me, and then substitute that in your head with phase reversed.
Okay, so
Polarity reversed.
I'm getting I had the thought of like, oh, I don't know if people would want to get into this on the stream, but nah, fuck it. I'm gonna be self-indulgent because I'm hosting this stream. So how is that?
Do it.
How is that different?
Remember.
Because like right here, I can start to pull this into a different phase, and so I don't have specific control, but right around there is about 180 degrees out of phase.
Yeah, so the peak on a regular sine wave, any regular wave, but especially a sine wave, because that's what you have in your wall for power. 180 degrees out of phase is the peak is directly over the valley, and vice versa. So if you take a 60 hertz AC power line, phase invert it, and then sum it back on the original, you get 0.
Yeah.
And so what you have in electrical power is you have 3 phases, A, B, and C, and those are 120 degrees out of phase with each other.
Oh, okay. So for that reason, 180 out of phase is not the same as phase inverted.
Because right. It is in power, because in power, so that's why if you look at a generator, inside the generator you have the rotors. The rotors are 120 degrees out of phase. That's why there's 3 of them instead of 4 of them, because if there's 4 of them, they'd be a perfect cross. And so A and B, or A and C, and B and D would cancel each other out. So the most number, you could do 5 theoretically, but 5 would be silly. So you have one at 0. If A is at 0, then B is plus 120 degrees and C is plus 240 degrees, or minus 120 degrees, because a sine wave is a circle. It is a perfect circle. So what you see with a sine wave, I'm sure we've all seen the animation of this, is you have a circle with a pencil on it, and then you roll that circle, and it creates a sine wave. And that's exactly what you're doing with a generator. But in audio, because the signal is not regular, right? It's all over the place. It's not a regular signal. Polarity reversed is not the same as 180 degrees out of phase.
Okay.
But you'll see this on electrical all the time, where you'll see if a circuit is polarity reversed for some reason, they'll write on it in Sharpie on the box 180 OOP, 180 degrees out of phase.
Okay, I'm happy I asked about that because I just learned something.
Yeah, that's the difference between power and audio. And the other thing you run into in audio is that technically, so like with vacuum tubes and transistors, because they only let current through one way, we're not actually dealing with alternating current. We're dealing with what's called continuously variable direct current. So the current is always flowing in one direction. It's going up and down all the time.
Okay.
As opposed to true direct current, which is a constant. And the way that's done is you basically, because what you get from a microphone and what you have to send to a speaker is alternating current, because you have to push the cone out and pull the cone back, right? What you're actually getting is you're applying a pad voltage to it to step it up, so it's all above 0.
Yeah, and that's the
That's the thing with vacuum tubes and transistors both. They'll only work if the voltage is flowing in one direction. If you try to reverse them, they don't work.
Yeah, that seems like if you were to try that, that seems like a good way to make your tubes explode.
No, unless you drive them to a very high voltage. So first rule of electrics is anything becomes a conductor if you have enough volts behind it. Now, it may not be a conductor for very long, but it's the same thing that would happen, say, if you had your old PS1 and you managed to jam the power cord in backwards. You would hear a loud snap, see the magic smoke escape out the back, and now your PS1 won't power up. That's because all the diodes on the board that were converting that AC to DC gave up their life because they very briefly became conductors in the wrong direction.
And I know because of the pre-stream chat we had that you have personal experience with this, with somebody blowing up your board.
Yes, I do. That was a slightly
Crazy.
different thing, but I also have experience the other way, which is a buddy of mine didn't bring his power cord with him. I'm like, what do you need a power cord for? I'll just make a suicide cord. And so I just cut a cord off a lamp, stripped it off, and tied it around the posts. And that worked really, really well until I realized that we were in an old house that didn't have polarized plugs, and I had it backwards.
Oh,
As soon as I
fuck.
plugged it in, snap! I'm like, oh, well, there goes your PS1. Sorry, buddy.
Sorry, buddy boy. But so to bring it back onto distortion, I'm actually happy you're here, CJ, because you can give us some live demonstrations. Because especially with tubes, like I said, I am completely unfamiliar and it's out of my wheelhouse. Like I can do distortion and everything digitally on here, but I don't know how it actually works in the real world.
So
Yeah.
physically, the mother of all distortion is overdrive. And overdrive is when you take that input voltage and you drive it over the limit of what the vacuum tube is supposed to be able to do. And then magic happens.
Yeah,
Which we
I
will now
remember.
hear.
Yeah, I remember. I remember back in my learning days. I'm still learning. I'm always learning. You know, when you're a musician, you're always learning. But when I was first starting out, I was a big metalhead, and so I was trying to get that distortion sound. And as I kind of, I guess, matured in my taste, I noticed that overdrive was taking over a lot. I felt like it was more focused on overdrive. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, overdrive was all we had for not all we had. This is before my time. But the only way to get overdrive was basically to take your amp and turn everything up to 11. That was the only way to get it.
Yeah,
And so that's where the
it
first
drives your amp.
right. So that's where we got the first effects pedals from, because it was essentially an attempt to try to get that same sound without wrecking your amplifier and pissing off your neighbors. You know.
Yeah.
But that's why, classic overdrive sound is literally the sound of amplifiers dying, screaming as they die.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a way to visual. It sucks because I have a perfect way to visualize this on here, what overdrive is, but unfortunately, because this is a floating application, my wave viewer, the screen recorder will not pick it up. So, but yeah, I like calling it sausaging. Like when you look at just a pristine MP3 and you just see all the way across it.
Yeah.
Just when they've pushed it to the absolute ceiling.
And so what's happening audio-wise is you're clipping, right? You're clipping the top and the bottom off the waveform. And part of that too is that, so this is one place where, this is the thing we were talking about before, where with a tube amp, so the ability of electrons to get from this side to this side of the grid is partially governed by quantum principles, right? Quantum teleportation.
Just kind
so
of
there is
fuck.
Yeah, there is literally no way to model that. It is more random than random. You are hearing the quantum foam of the universe theoretically. Now, practically speaking, you're not hearing any of that. Same thing as the thing is also acting as an antenna, and so in theory, it's picking up stray radio sounds and like the microwave background radiation and everything else, but you're not really hearing that. Like I can show you on an oscilloscope, a plugin is going to produce a waveform that's going to look almost exactly the same, and to your ear, it's going to sound the same.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just math. It's just math.
Everything is math.
I know I'm kind of here to like show the analog side of things, but even there's many artists and musicians who will play live, who I respect, who will still like plug everything through a computer for their live setup. That way they can almost instantaneously change the effects as they need fit without having to click through a bunch of buttons and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. You have a lot more flexibility, and most importantly, you have consistency. Because the problem with actually overdriving a tube is that every different model of tube is going to act differently. Every different tubes within the same model, different production runs will run differently. And sometimes even tubes within the same production run will run differently, because it's purely a matter of how the wire got wrapped on that grid.
And especially in the live setting, I think it's a lot more important, which I love hearing analog gear, but also when people are there to actually listen to a show, I think it's more important to keep the ball rolling and keep them like entertained rather than, and enjoy your drinks and 5 minutes of silence while I twiddle some knobs, everybody.
Yeah, and the other problem you run into is you do find that classic, Western Electric vacuum tube. You actually put that in amp and overdrive it, it's not going to sound the same the second time or the third time, and eventually it's going to die because you're going to break the thing. And so if you find one of those vintage tubes, actually the most valuable thing you can do with it is to get it to an audio engineer who's going to feed a bunch of test signals into it and create the model of it so that then you can have the consistent sound. It's exactly what John Deacon did from Queen when he found the last Deak amplifiers. He gave it to a bunch of nerds who sat there and modeled the thing so that now we have accurate models of the Deak amplifier.
Fuck yeah. And so, CJ, so from your perspective, we're talking about it from kind of a high level right now, but from a practical perspective, like these different...
From an ooga booga perspective?
I don't mean it like that, but yeah.
I know, I'm kidding.
Yeah, so in terms of, I think the words we threw out were fuzz, overdrive, and distortion. How do you personally distinguish those for when you actually decide this track needs overdrive or distortion or fuzz? What does that mean to you?
It's almost like kind of what you guys have been saying. It's like it depends on how like loud you want to make your amp or your amp sim scream. I mean, they even have like overdrives that are called tube screamers. It depends on how loud you want to make it sound, not how loud you want to make it per se, but like how loud you want to make it and how obnoxious, not in a bad way, but I hope you understand what I'm coming from when I say that, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because like, you especially in like a lot of like 80s and 90s rock and metal, you get that really like lead guitar distortion, like guitar shredding sound, and you still have that, and then it leads into today. But then you also have a lot of modern day like pop music, a lot of modern day like rock and hip hop using cleaner guitars and whatnot. Those would probably use more like drives, if anything. If you want to have like a more in your face sound, they probably would stay away from what is known as distortion and would stick with basic overdrive, I would say.
Yeah, and the thing that I like too is there seems to be a trend for bringing back a lot of the mid-range with guitar sound. Like CJ, because you also come from the guitar perspective, obviously. Did you also early on do that fucking Metallica thing where it's just like boost the bass, boost the treble, mid-range? Doesn't fucking exist.
Yeah, I guess I started like valuing that, and there is value to it, especially if I'm like playing by myself, just to have that kind of low end fills in my space when I'm playing by myself and just feels nicer. I would say in the mix of music, I probably would prefer less bass in my guitar, so I'd probably turn bass down and keep maybe the middle and treble up. But you can, there's also times where there is a certain sound you want to, maybe you want that Metallica sound, and so you would turn that bass up, you turn that treble up a bit, and maybe scoop the middle out, you know. And it depends on your amp, it depends on your mix. There's so many factors that, but yeah, generally speaking,
Shit.
uh, I agree. I agree. There was a
It's
time where
a
I did that.
creative decision.
Shane
Creative
in
decision.
chat
I
is
agree.
he actually plays guitar too. This is my buddy. We used to live together and
Yeah.
had a brief thing that we metalcore band that we were
Hold on.
doing for a little bit. He says treble 10, bass 10, mid 4. I know that setting
That's.
very well.
I think he might have seen me do something like that. But yeah, that's the sound right there.
See, when I was noodling around on guitar, it was the Spinal Tap thing, where it's literally just run your
Th-
hand down the amp stack and turn everything up to 11.
this one
And
goes up
yeah,
to 11.
go up to 10. Why not one more? Or
Yeah,
whatever they said.
for me it was just on that fucking little uh Spider 3 or whatever the fuck I had, just like, oh, let's click the ultra button. That's the most ultra metal, right? Yeah. No fucking concept.
Oh man.
So you were mentioning too you had a bunch of can you show off your pedals? I never got
Yes.
much into them. And so and Eddie, you might be able to fill in with this because my perspective is that a lot of these like especially the Boss pedals and everything, that's all digital
Some
modeling that
are.
you're getting through the stomp box. A lot of those probably aren't analog, are they?
A lot
Or
of them are now digital, but there's still a huge market for the analog ones. And the analog ones, I suppose the best way to explain them would be they work like a modular synth. So they're
oh
just a
fuck yeah.
circuit. They're a circuit that monkeys with the sound.
Hmm.
And you're doing that via the classic electrical engineering, what's called RLC analysis. So resistors, inductors, and capacitors to monkey with the sound a little bit. And then sometimes you run into things where, like, again, a lot of the magic is using this kind of transistor versus that kind of transistor, using a tube versus a transistor. A lot of the effects boxes, like literally, you open them up and they're just random coils of wire. It looks like, and it's if you open them up and like move the wire a little bit in them, they're not going to sound right anymore because of all the weird inductive noise that's happening inside of them. But
Uh, to
um,
to cut you off really quick, just because I'm so fucking curious, CJ, what the hell is that thing in the top left? That box with like the seven different yeah.
That is my delay pedal.
mm,
Okay, that makes sense
It's
for that amount of knobs.
yes, you can do quite a bit with it, and I can also make it not a delay and make it into other pedals, like maybe like a chorus pedal, say.
Yeah, because the way I
if you're
understand
doing sorry, go ahead.
the way I understand a chorus is that it's really just multiple of the same signal just out of phase from one another and slightly detuned. So I could see how using echo
Hmm.
creatively could give you that effect.
Mhm.
Yeah, what I do, so um, unless you kind of want me to run through the board, I can talk about that real quick. What I'll do is I'll turn the playback so it's like instantaneous. So when I play something, the delay effect immediately plays out, and I just make it into like one repetition. So it's almost like it plays, it covers the sound as I'm playing it almost,
Okay.
if that makes sense. So
I,
yeah, so there's quite a bit of like experimentation you can do with it to turn it into other effects and whatnot.
okay. I noticed you got a big muff there too, which I used to know a girl in high school called the Big Muff. She did not play guitar though.
Yeah, they turned her into a pedal, unfortunately.
Heyo.
Um, yeah, one thing with a pedal board, and this probably goes in music production too, on across the board, is the order of your effects.
Oh yeah. So I can actually
It's
demonstrate that here.
Yeah, and so even more so on a pedal board because each pedal is taking the current sound it has to push it out into a new sound, which goes all the way back to your guitar, which
Hmm.
means you better you can't you can't cut corners in your playing.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta practice, 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 and so yeah, I'm a bit rusty myself. I'm still getting back into the music game, but I'm here to learn along with the audience here.
Fuck yeah. And out of curiosity, Eddie, because I never fucked around too much with pedals because I always found that whenever I added a pedal, like every time I added another connector, my signal seemed to lose a bunch of quality. Is that from the engineer side of things? What
That's
truth
the
is there
thing.
to that?
Because you're every time you're using another plug, you're losing some dB.
Yeah,
Um, Probably not a lot, but it adds up, and you're adding noise. So the big thing is you want to keep those things clean, and you don't want to monkey around with them a lot. But for me, this is the thing where digital really shines, is the flexibility. Is that and I know a lot of guitar players in studio that do this now, where they're doing all of this in software through a computer, like you said, and then their pedal board is literally just a bunch of foot switches that are sending MIDI events to trigger
yeah,
presets
yeah,
in whatever DAW they're using. But like
exactly.
delay, the thing I was going to mention earlier is if you're not doing digital delay, it, you're no stop. Okay, you're not.
Love
The
yourself.
You're
best
not
best delay.
you're not Tommy Iommi from Black Sabbath with the tape loop on your belt. Okay, you don't need that anymore. We have digital for a
Did
reason now.
did he really do that?
Yeah, well, that's all he had.
Oh fuck. I
He also had like three fingers too, so
Yeah,
I
the only well, three and a half.
well, three and a, oh right.
Yeah, that's the secret to the
I
Black Sabbath sound, is just cut like
I'm
part of your finger off, and then when you hit the note to get that, is just do this.
yeah, I'm happy you guys know about that because I was gonna bring that up. For those of you that don't know, Tony Iommi got
Tony
he
Iommi.
he got his on his fretting hand the last day working at a factory. He cut off the tips of his two fingers, so he had to wear
Oh
fucking
damn.
thimbles over them to play the guitar, and he also tuned down his low E string so there was less tension on his fingers, and that's why drop D is so popular today.
Yeah, that's what I remember. I took a music history class, and they were teaching about that, how it was just like easier for him to play, and pretty easy to play. The
Yeah. Shane
strings are pretty
says
loose.
he only used a noise gate pedal to reduce feedback, relied heavily on dialing in my tube amp for the sound I wanted, and that's it. I
Yep.
Yeah, that's useful. And speaking, I guess I can segue noise gate into these two pedals here I have, because these both this is a preamp, and I'm still experimenting with it, but I believe that's something I put after my drives and before maybe my effects. And then I have this overdrive here, and they both have a built-in noise gate. And
oh,
something
okay.
I noticed, yeah. So you can really get that driven sound, but like if you want to make something chuggy but clear, you can get that sound with these. Um, and one thing too, I noticed, especially if I'm gonna have all these pedals on, which I rarely do, but if I want to, like some people do, if I want to make my amp scream, um, that noise gate is pretty helpful because if I'm not playing, I don't want to have it screaming the whole time. But if you let off the noise gate a little bit, you will get that feedback just because there's so much power and there's so much noise and whatnot.
And We brought this up a little bit, but so right here I have my mixer inserts, and the way this works is it goes top down, where
Yeah.
whatever I'm plugging into, in this case, an instance of a FM synth called Citrus, which is has a detuned saw wave going through it right now.
All right.
Let me turn those effects off. Sounds like that. It's got a chorusy effect to it.
Yeah.
I'm plugging that into a parametric EQ, which does shit like this. So I'll just put a notch on that really quick.
I see
And
that.
then I have it running into, let me just pull up a random preset. Let's do walkie-talkie. That's pretty obvious. So it's going through the parametric EQ first and then into a distortion. And
Mhm.
that makes a big difference as opposed to I love FL Studio because I could just quickly rearrange those. That makes a big difference than if I pumped it through distortion first and then through the EQ. That's what it would sound
Yeah.
like distortion first. That's what it sounds like with EQ first. So I like using that creatively because you can have an EQ before and after your distortion and fuck around to get exactly the sound you want.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. We're trying to add the noise we want and get rid of the noise we don't want.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes you
Preach.
pump it through the distortion and then you just got to scoop out a couple of the unwanted signals.
And
Yeah.
someday we're gonna have to do a whole episode just on what parametric EQ was before you had plugins, because I was having to do this crap with knobs.
I
Um,
I
holy
mean
crap.
I mean technically everything that you see right there is technically like there's sliders here, but
Yeah.
everything is still controlled by knobs. It's the part actually, I'm sorry. Let's get to CJ because I don't want you to just sit there holding your camera this whole time.
Yeah,
I
no.
can. I can. Do you want me to set it down?
Oh,
We can get back to
whatever you want to
that.
do. I didn't know if you were. It sounded like you had more you wanted to show with the pedals, so I just don't want you to be sitting
I
there
have
the whole
plenty.
time.
I'm. I
Yeah,
have
we'll
no
put a
rush.
pin in parametric EQ because that's a whole episode.
All right.
Yeah, I want to as a bookmark for that for later. I'm interested in talking to you about that because from what I understand, the way that EQ works is through phase inversion, which is why in a DAW, if you automate your notch filter, let's say, to sweep around, you'll actually get unwanted frequencies because of that phase inversion not being able to keep up.
Okay.
So, I I just got into it a little bit. That's for later. Fucking go away, thoughts.
Be gone, thought.
Fuck yeah.
Engineering ADD.
So yeah, sorry. We were cutting you off, CJ.
No, no, I don't think you were. But I guess I can like run through my pedal board and kind of discuss what we were talking about, the order of the effect, and how I have mine set, and I kind of have mine set in one would call the the general setting. I have the minimal stuff. I could give or take a few things. Maybe I could use a compressor or whatnot, like what you said last episode. Compressors are definitely an important pedal in someone's chain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, First pedal, of course, is my tuning pedal. I want all my sound to be in tune, so that's the first thing coming from my guitar. And then here I have this is what is called a precision drive. It's an overdrive pedal, and I can try to go over the different kind of knobs. There's the attack. So if I have this all the way down, it's fixed positions, switches like that. It opens the sound up, so it gives it that fuzzier sound. It gives it that, if I'm playing chords or riffing around, it's gonna give it that full sound. Or if I want something that's kind of like chuggy and like very precise, turning it up will chop that sound up for sure. And makes your sound tighter. It attacks that fuzziness, I guess you could say. It's the attack knob. Then it
Oh,
has the volume. Yeah,
that's really different from what I understand of like the
I might be wrong.
ADS. No, it's just weird terminology for me because I'm coming from the synth world where attack means
Yep.
Yeah,
something different.
You're thinking of the envelope, the
Yeah, the
ASDR,
envelope filters.
ADSR
yeah.
envelope.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to
Like
get my head around it for a second.
like I said, I'm still kind of dusting off the cobwebs here. Getting back into
No,
it.
what you said makes sense from the pedal side of things. It's where I came
Yeah,
from it.
yeah. I think the word attack here is used non-technically, but anyway. And then we got the volume, and then we have this thing. It's called bright, and I guess you could say that's the tone. If you turn the bright down, you lose a lot of that clearness, and you get a little bit of more of that fuzziness, but not so choppy and just uh, and the higher you turn it, you can really hear the high end of things more clearly. If I play some kind of chord, you're probably going to hear the higher strings more clearly with that. And
And
then we got the drive here, the actual drive knob, which is like the gain, what how hard it's going to sound when you turn it on. What were you
yeah.
gonna say?
Um, so Eddie, in terms of brightness, the way that I interpret that a lot of times is that it's adding extra high frequency content, a lot more of those harmonics, where it's acting as a low pass filter, where added
Yeah.
brightness is opening that up. Is that true, or is that more like a
Well,
notch filter?
if I had to guess what was going on here, I'd say that the attack and the bright, the signal's getting separated by frequency. And
Okay.
so you're always going to want to, so the volume and the drive are going to be added to everything no matter what. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you want to take out, so sometimes, like you were saying, if you just drive everything to 11, um, that wail at the top end will turn into like a dentist drill kind of sound. It'll get very piercing. And so the
Yeah,
bright knob is probably going to pull some of that out. Um, and then attack on a guitar, attack is literally the sound of the pick hitting the strings. And so that's a specific frequency notch that gets taken out. So if you think
that's
of
probably why it's
Brian,
at fixed positions, right?
yeah, so if you think about like Brian May and Queen, where when he's doing stuff, like you don't hear the beginning of the note. It's real smooth. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Versus,
Right. It
like
attacks that.
thrash metal or something like that. You want to hear a lot of that crunchy sound is the sound of the pick hitting the strings.
Yeah.
So that's that
That
Metallica
chunk.
sound. Yeah, that real
Yeah.
crunchy guitar sound is you want a lot of attack. And
The
that's actually where it comes from on the envelope fleshy is so attack on any musical instrument is so on a keyboard it's when on a because this comes from piano it's the sound of the hammer striking the strings,
Mm-hmm.
right? So on a synthesizer the attack is what happens basically in that first 150 milliseconds after you hit the key. And so like as you remove attack you are removing essentially in a way you're removing like the velocity value of the MIDI event because that's
Yep.
where attack
yeah,
really matters.
that stuff's ringing a bell to me for sure.
And
Uh,
then you have the other parts that you have this on guitar too is you have sustain, right? And guitar, there's not a lot you can do. Sustain really exists in the guitar itself. You can get some of that in a tube where on the high frequencies you'll get ringing in the circuits and things like that, but the
Big
sustain
glitching.
really exists in the guitar in a lot of ways. Um, and then delay or decay, not delay. Decay is how
We'll get to
fast
that.
it drops off. And then release is the opposite of attack. So on the guitar, it's when you let go of the strings. If you're doing a palm mute, That's essentially like 100% instantaneous decay. Or on a piano, decay is you hold the note, and then release is when you hit the pedal or you take your fingers off the keys and it actually mutes the strings.
Just trying to find a way to set up a visual for that real quick, but that's not working very well. So, sorry, back
Um,
to you, CJ. What's the next in your chain?
well, I'll also mention, like in the context of like the I follow this band called Periphery, and one of the guitarists actually made this pedal, and they made this pedal. In the context of their music, they really uh, they have this attack, and they like the attack high, um, when especially when they're chugging, because they'll usually let the bass do all of that work. They'll let the bass and the drum really be that attacking uh, sound, while the guitar really just worries about the high end.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so they in a way they're kind of employing a side chaining effect to in a live context. That's kind of what they're achieving.
Yeah, I mean they do that in their recording too, for sure. But that's kind of like the way they come at it, and uh, yeah, it was really eye opening, because I was like, oh, I thought a lot of that was the guitar and the bass wasn't as important, but in this case, the bass is like in many ways more important than the guitar in certain parts of their music and their songs and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and I can go to my next pedal here, my Big Muff. So this is it's a distortion, essentially. It's a very fuzzy distortion. We just got three knobs here: volume, tone, pretty general, and then we got the sustain. Sustain, and if you also have sustain pedals. Um, Pretty much does what the word does. It means it sustains the sound. If I'm gonna play like a note, like especially on a high note on a high string, and I really want to make it scream and ring that note out and vibrato and whatnot, I'm gonna have the sustain up high, because it's going to uh, bring up the sound, even though technically it might start dying out on the guitar. It's gonna keep it up so I can sustain the sound.
Yeah. And Shane is saying if you listen to metalcore, the use of punch of the bass pedal. Oops, sorry, I think I misread that. If you listen to
Oh,
metalcore, the use of the punch of the bass pedal to emphasize the palm muted chugging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
hold on, let me see
And
that again. If you listen to
and
metalcore, then yeah, yeah,
and hello to
yeah.
you as well, Wyatt. Flesh Priest or Yepsen is both fine here.
Oh, hold on.
Happy to have you.
Yeah, I was thinking more of a well, that Metallica sound especially, but that's what you want in a really good thrash sound, is you want that real chunky low end with the
This,
bass.
yeah, this Big Muff is perfect for that. I mean, if I want a Metallica sound, this
Oh,
is pretty much this is the only pedal I need, really. That
yeah.
and maybe some reverb if I'm gonna have like a really dramatic solo.
My
Mm-hmm.
my philosophy with guitar sustain
And
was
delay.
always just get a fucking really heavy ass through neck, solid body, and that worked fairly well because this motherfucker sustains really well. It's fucking mahogany. But
Are those EMPs? Those pickups?
um, ESPs, yeah. This is LTD, which is like
Yeah.
the cheap brand of fucking ESP.
Oh, I know all about that.
Oh, I thought you had an LTD.
Yeah, this is LTD Eclipse off the
Okay.
ESP brand. Pretty good guitar, and it has those EMP pickups. Are yours active? I'm assuming.
No, mine are passive. I always meant to upgrade to
Uh,
active. But
I feel like passive's the upgrade, but that's just my preference.
I wouldn't know. I've only actually ever used passive. I've heard active is supposed to be really good for live because you don't get as much electrical interference as I understand it.
Yeah, the difference is one's powered, one isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And
yeah, so I have
so
I have
if
a
you're in a
battery in my
noisy
guitar.
environment, an active pickup, its voltage is already going to be higher because you're layering the sound on top of an already existing voltage. Whereas a
Okay.
passive pickup is going to be more trying to think of the producer word for it, detailed, let's say. It's probably going to have more dynamic range, but it's going to be much more sensitive to noise.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one thing I notice about the active is like it's since it's battery operated, like it's kind of like it's always active,
And
essentially. I,
does this apply to microphones as well? Because I know when I've tried recording vocals a couple times, like I have to shut off all the lights and everything. Is that actual electrical interference, or is that just the
well,
sound
Can
of
be.
electricity?
pickups are
Um,
microphones.
Pickups, yeah, kind of. A pickup works like a generator. So what the pickup's actually picking up is the pickup has it's just a coil of wire that's acting like and it either has a permanent magnet in it or it's acting like an electromagnet. And the strings are vibrating in that magnetic field, and so creating small voltage fluctuations, as opposed to like the original Gibson pickup, which was literally like a phonograph needle just jammed in the side of a guitar. Um, so an electromagnetic pickup is it works like a generator. So you have
Okay.
a magnetic field, and you have a conductor, and you have relative motion between the two. And so it's actually inducing a small voltage in the coil that then gets amplified by your amplifier, preamp, and then amplifier to make loud noises.
Okay.
But with microphones the same thing. So the problem with microphones is whether we're talking a condenser mic or a dynamic mic, um, those are very low voltages, and so they are very sensitive to noise. And with a microphone and a guitar, they are unbalanced sounds. Typically, depends on the microphone. So if you've got a microphone that has an XLR in the back, right, that's a balanced sound. So it's already balanced, which means that hopefully by the time it gets there, it's going to reject any electromagnetic interference that's happening. But a guitar is always unbalanced. And so any kind of electromagnetic interference across that guitar cord is going to get picked up,
Okay.
which
I
is different than ground hum, which we talked about a little bit last week. Ground hum is
Yeah.
caused by multiple paths to ground.
Okay, so it just occurred to me, and this might be a dumb question. I have in I have audio interface boxes that within the same plug can accept XLR or quarter-inch jacks. Why don't guitars just use XLR?
Because you're never the so the voltages
It's
off of
like
a
it's different,
microphone.
right?
Yeah, well, the voltages off of guitar are tiny even compared to a microphone. They're
Okay.
really, really small. And so if you try to balance those, so the first thing you do when you're balancing a signal is you split it in two, you're losing 6 dB. You're having the voltage.
Okay.
Um, so uh, it's you can do that with what's called a balun or a direct box. You can turn a guitar signal into and that actually has like a little preamp in it. It just steps up the voltage a little bit so that then
I
you can
remember,
balance it.
yeah, I remember in my live experience, if I was playing an acoustic, I would go into a direct box.
Yep. I use them in churches all the time.
Yep.
Wyatt
Yeah.
Coverdale is saying, "I know close to nothing about audio technology, but this is still interesting to someone who enjoys electronic sciences in general. I've You're talking to the right guy, Eddie over there. Over there. There we go. I've never been interested in audio really. I see it as not important. You can leave."
I'm sorry.
Sucks to
I
be
love
you,
you, dude.
dude.
It's one of the five senses, the five main senses.
And
So,
really, it's kind of my favorite one. Let's be honest here.
I mean, there's a lot of good shit you can get out of the other ones, but yeah, no, audio is great.
I like having my eargasms, you know?
Yeah, because
There's eyegasms, there's nosegasms, but eargasms is powerful, I think.
Yeah, I mean, because let's face it, a picture can create your space, and like that's how you experience this exact moment of time, but or this exact space. But audio and music is how you experience a sense of time.
And you can
Oh,
put you yeah, that's crazy. You
You
could
wanna
you
hit
could
this,
put
bro?
you can put audio over a painting and it can change the entire mood of how one perceives the painting.
Oh yeah, like oh god, have you guys seen there's videos of like student projects where they chop up like trailers but then put different music over it. So somebody made it
Yeah.
took Mary
Yeah, yeah,
Poppins
yeah.
and called it Scary Mary, where they put horror music over it and it seems like
Or
she's coming to
yeah.
get you.
Yeah. Or the Cat in the Hat.
Oh fuck yeah, I seen that. That was good.
there's a
Um,
YouTube channel that I'll have to post in the Discord where it's literally just the guy putting Walk of Life over the ending of like every movie, and it always works.
Walk of Life. I
Um, who did that song? Crap, is it Dire Straits?
looking
It's
it
like a
up.
baseball song. I don't know. It's just that's
I have
gonna
a
bug me
laptop.
now.
Dire Straits, yep.
Um, it's the one that has the organ in it. So it starts like the baseball-y organ type thing, and it's I'm not gonna sing on the stream. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna do that. Especially
Oh,
that song. It's way out of my
da
range.
da 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 da. It's something along those lines. I'm not a singer
Yeah,
either. All right. I'm sorry to do this. I gotta step away to the bathroom really quick. I just pounded that entire yerba mate, and it's coming back with a vengeance.
nice.
I'll be right back, you guys.
For sure. All right, Eddie. Um,
So you've got the preamp after the distortion.
yeah, I'm still like playing around with it because I feel
Okay.
like different preamps you would put in depending on the spot. Before I put the preamp after everything because I when I was learning about the preamp, I thought the preamp was literally just before the amp. Um, and then I tried this after that, and for some reason the sound of combining these two was like just awful, the way it just mixed together. But this order was like the most cooperative for
Mm-hmm.
me. So
Because
it might
in my mind, a preamp. See, I'm thinking from a mic preamp, and so that the only purpose of a preamp is to take a mic level signal and step it up to a line level signal. So typically you do that. So in live, you would have all your microphones on stage come into a preamp, and then that preamp drops into the mixing board, where
mm,
you then mix everything and then send it out to the power amps. But that preamp looks like it's doing a lot more processing than just stepping it up. In a guitar, it would probably be the same thing as you're effectively taking the line level voltage and stepping it up to or the mic level voltage, or whatever you want to call that in a guitar, and stepping it up to a line level, which makes sense then that that's going to sound like crap if you try to apply if you try to apply distortion after the fact,
yeah,
because you're dealing with a signal that's bigger, and so when you distort that, it's going to clip a lot worse, and do weird things.
yeah. So perfect timing, Mr. Flesh. We can kind of move on to this pedal now. We started on this one. Um,
Yeah, actually, I'll
so
I'll cut you off
yeah,
really quick just to catch
yeah,
up on chat.
sure.
Shane was saying there's this trend of adding music from My Hero anime over things, and it always makes everything hype as fuck. Wyatt
Yeah,
says, "Oh,
or
Wyatt, you're
the
good. You're not spamming."
the Attack on Titan music.
Oh fuck yeah, that original intro was godlike.
Oh yeah. Mhm. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
Perfect meme
And
material.
some Japanese metal is too much. Some is absolutely perfect. Like sometimes I'm listening to some metal, like especially power metal and Japanese metal. I
Permanently.
get that Salieri and Amadeus criticism where it's like too many notes. You know what I mean?
Like
Less is
it's like,
more.
well, isn't it usually? Aren't they? Don't they usually put that shit through like some MIDI keyboard anyway? They just map the notes out because it's just too
Some do.
fast. And
Yeah, I'm
it sounds
sure.
like
Um,
super processed.
but then you get the flip side of the Salieri rule. Too many notes is the Yngwie Malmsteen rule, which is still my favorite Yngwie Malmsteen quote, which is less is not more. How can less be more? More is more.
I
Ooh,
saw him live.
let's put a bookmark on that dude because I want to get back to him in a second. CJ, what is that pedal?
Um, it's a foot pedal. So it's a preamp. Um, it's got a couple of features. Like the Precision Drive, it's made for that like chuggy but like choppy sound, so you can really get the clear notes, but have it nice and gated. So when after you play your note, you don't have all that excess noise after it. Um, and so I'll go. So that's why it has the tight button. And then if I'm gonna, this is the bypass, so I'm turning it on now, and so that turns on the preamp. And this has a very driven sound as well. So like I feel like in many ways this could do what that does as well. But the two together make for a powerful combo. Um,
Okay.
yeah. So I also have a gate here, a noise gate, and I can turn that down. But I have that all the way up because the
Does that
gate.
knob have LED? I thought that was just a light.
Yeah, yeah.
What
Hold
the
on. Let me see
fuck?
if I can.
Is
Let
that
me
the gamer pedal?
Hold on. Let me make a sound on my quarter inch and see if it. Yeah. See, I'm making a sound on the quarter inch or whatever. So it picks it
Okay.
up, and when the gate turns on, that's when the gate turns on. So if I'm gonna have it like if I turn it all the way down, it's not gonna capture anything. If I turn it up a tiny bit, it's gonna slowly it's gonna get that and then
Okay.
yeah. But
That's
yeah, this is yeah, it's cool because so this pedal has a gate and this pedal also has a gate, so I like double gate it so it's like extra tight. Um,
I wish I could say the same about Big Muff.
oh yeah, that's it's not tight, but
It's
the tight
hella tight.
hella tight. Tight is right. Um, and I can go through the knobs here real quick. So I got the volume, and here it's a preamp, and so it kind of acts like an amp with the bass, mid, and treble settings here. And then the gain setting. So you
Mhm.
kind of dial in your sound there, and if you can even many musicians will still use pedals when plugging into a digital music software, and they may not use plugins all the time. And if you're using this, it has a cab sim knob here too. You can turn up and imitate a cabs. It'll put on a cab sim, so you wouldn't even have to do that if you didn't want to.
Okay, so um I never got into that minutia of guitar. To me, coming at it from this perspective, and I want your guys' input on this. To me, a cab was always the way to shape your sound and get that amplitude of the signal up. It was it was coloring things, and the amplifier's job was just to take that sound and put it out into the world. Is that is there
That's a
any?
classic live sound way to look at things. Like that's how I would look at things, which is that um
I mean, in recording, you mic the amps too, and the mic placement and like
right.
how far it is from the speaker. All of that matters too. And you have cab simulators and cab plugins that you can imitate that and simulate that as well.
Yeah, so I guess where I was going with that is uh where I'm hung up on that is if you're already controlling the EQ of the signal with those knobs, what does the cab sim do? Because I figured that's the same role.
I have, well, personally, I've not experienced with the cab sim because I got this after my MacBook crapped the bed, so my DAW stopped. I couldn't use my DAW, and so I stopped recording on my MacBook for the time being.
Okay. Yeah, you were telling me
Speaking of
about
which,
that.
I gotta focus.
So
right.
he's as a
busy.
performer, he's using EQ differently than I am as an engineer, right?
Yes.
So his EQ is to get
I
the
also have
sound
an
he
EQ
wants.
pedal.
Right. My EQ is literally just to compensate for room modes and other. It's literally just for equalization of the sound. So I'm doing it to clean the sound. He's doing it to dirty up, but the way he wants it. Whereas where I'm at in the process, sitting behind the board, whether that's live or recording, I want to take that signal that he's giving me and I want to get it down to tape or out to the speakers, out to the house as unmolested as possible. Right?
I
The
make
sound
the
I
shit.
want to
He
have go into
polishes
the
it.
mic. Right. The sound that goes into the mic is the sound that should be coming out of the speakers as far as I'm concerned. As whether I'm doing sound reinforcement or recording. I want you to hear what I hear if I'm sitting right there listening to him play.
That Wyatt in chat says, "Wow, amazing. This is the most confused I've been in years. Welcome to the wonderful world of audio and electrical."
Yep.
That that might be the best segue I'm going to get because you guys said you didn't know about this. I was reading in a history of guitar book that distortion originally came in because once upon a time all amplifiers were literally just to amplify the sound out to be heard, which of course if you crank it up high enough you're going to get some natural overdrive of turning things into a square wave.
Right.
But I think it started really big with jazz guys where some people would crank their amps up so loud that it would just blow out the speaker cones and they would naturally be distorted. It's like, oh, well, I got to get a new one now. And a couple of jazz guys were like, no, that actually sounds kind of nice. I like that. But you can't buy that sound straight off the shelves. So what they would start doing is literally taking razor blades to their speaker cones to fuck them up so that they were distorted, so that they couldn't do their job properly to get that distorted sound. They're like, oh, fuck yeah, I slit this just right. And so that's
I
when
feel like I heard that.
yeah, people started coming in like, we should just make this. How do we just fuck up that signal without people fucking up their cones?
Well, and it's even simpler than that. So the reason distortion became so popular in popular music is because everyone was buying cheap amps. And so like good amps didn't distort. The distortion's bad. Why would you ever want an amp that distorts? And the way you do that is by over-speccing the components essentially. So like why, if I have an amplifier that's going to drive at maximum voltage X, why would I ever have a tube in there that's going to distort at that voltage, right? That's just bad engineering because these things were designed by electrical engineers who are like, no, distortion bad, distortion no good. We don't want distortion. But those amps cost money because you're over-speccing the amps. That takes real expertise in designing the circuitry. Whereas you get like, in the 60s, you get fly-by-night companies like Orange and Marshall and companies that are making cheap amps designed typically by musicians or guys who really didn't understand what the hell they were doing. And they were just putting cheap components. They're putting cheap tubes in them, and cheap tubes distort. On the side of the box, it'll say, "Yeah, this will run it." But that's, for instance, why when you talk to musicians and guitar players, the tubes that they're looking for are like the Western Electric ones. Whereas me coming up through the electrical engineering would say, "Why would you ever want a Western Electric tube over a General Electric?" Because the Western Electric ones the side of the box will say it'll perform to this spec, but they ain't actually going to perform. Oh, that's why, because they distort. They distort in a way that you want them to. Whereas, like, you find a box of vintage GE tubes, that's great for running like an old PA system for your high school, but that's not anything a guitar player is ever going to want, because it's going to sound. You hit the note, and it's going to sound exactly the way you hit the note. It's not going to distort.
Mm.
I always find that really funny, when the shittier things are actually more desired, like
Yeah.
the Roland 808. As I think I brought that up last stream, of that was supposed to be a shitty fucking drum synth to accompany, be your backing track live on stage. Now you cannot buy an original anymore because they're so highly sought after.
Well, and it's the same thing of once transistors became a thing, and especially MOSFET transistors. Why would you ever want anything else? Well, the reason you would want something else is because you're a guitar player who wants to sound like the world is coming to an end when you hit a power chord. And a tube's going to do that. A MOSFET transistor is not going to do that. But in your
Yeah.
car, in your power amps, you want that MOSFET transistor because it's perfectly flat signal response, frequency response.
So sorry,
Yeah.
cut you off, CJ.
No, totally. I feel like the actual, the distortion sound itself is quite literally like just like the connotation of rock and metal. It's hard, it's gritty, it's harsh, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like, that's what gives it that sound, and that's why we have distortion, that's why we have the jazz, we have these
Mhm.
guitars screaming, Um yeah, you want me to move to my next pedal?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
And I think once you get,
virtual pedal board.
I think once you, yeah, once you go through that, I actually want to give a demonstration of what distortion is, because Wyatt brought up distortion. I think is caused by two non-synchronous sound waves crossing each other. Am I right about that? It's been a long time since I've done vibration stuff, so I am going to demonstrate what distortion is after this, and I'm just going to get that set up.
Sure. So those are basically my drives and my distortions. Those are the first things I want. My boosts, if you have any boosts, you want to put those first, and then I would put your effects, because you want your boosted sound to come out with the effects. You don't want the effects to come before your boosted sound, because you're not going to have your guitar boosted. You're going to have your guitar sound, and then you're going to have the effects that's put over it distorted. You're going to have that stuff driven, and that's usually that's not what you want.
You see, that's the traditional approach, but once you get into a noise band, everything goes out the window.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, this is the traditional setup, and I've been playing it safe and going this way. There's quite a bit of knobs here. Time, that is the time. So if I want like the beat, the time signature, the BPM, if I can do it manually like this, or I have a tap tempo knob right here, I can just use that.
Oh, nice.
I also got 4 presets, so I can dial everything in and put that one preset and then 3 others. I can also switch between the type of delay, whether it's the quarter note, which is the actual beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, or if I can switch it to the dotted 8th note, which kind of gives it like a
swing
kind of
feeling.
Yeah, like, so if I'm gonna 1, 2, 3, 4, go dun, 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 dun. And then you have the triplet, which is really fast. If you want a long-lasting delay, you wouldn't really use it. It's more for the instantaneous sound. I feel like I haven't used that. I usually use the quarter note and the dotted 8th in my delays, preferably, and then that if I want something different. But these I usually stick with these two. Feedback is this knob here. That's how long the delay will go for. So if I play a note, dun, it'll go dun 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 dun. If I have it really long, it'll keep going dun 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 dun, and it'll keep a consistent volume. It won't die out. If I have it lower, it'll die out quicker. Um, and the mix is how long that delay is. If I want the delay just as loud as my guitar, if I want the delay to kind of be in the background, or if I want the delay to somehow overpower my guitar, turn it up. Intense, and then we have kind of the modulation effects you have on this. Right here, these three knobs. You have the modulation itself, the rate of that modulation. If I have the rate high, you'll usually get like a wiggly sound because the rate of the modulation is high, and the intensity of that modulation itself. And depending on this knob here, there's so many different kind of delay effects you can use. Depending on that, the modulation effect will do something different. Like I have a reverse here, I have a diffuse one, so it'll diffuse the sound if I turn the modulation up. And I believe that's the one I use for my chorus effect as well, if I'm going to do that. But yeah, that's my delay pedal.
That thing looks fucking
Fancy.
sick.
That's awesome.
It's pretty cool. These Source Audio made these both. I think they're in Boston. But they made these two pedals, this one and the reverb coming up next. Did you want me to talk about what's up?
I was gonna say I like how it almost seemed like you slipped into an accent there, just Boston.
Boston.
You gotta say it with the accent.
Praktikan Havigad.
Car keys.
Oh, and also really quick, hello to you too. Hello to you too, Lucas. Nice to see you here, dude.
Now he needs a talk box. You can be Peter Frampton.
So yeah, reverb. I am actually I might have talked about this. The way that I differentiate to people echo and reverb is that I explain echo as if you heard a sound. Echo is copy and paste that sound, but each time it's a little bit quieter. Whereas reverb is literally the reverberation of the sound in the space you're in. Reverb is the room.
Yeah. Like you're in a cave. If I'm going to shout in an empty cave, the sound's going to come back to me, but it's reflected off a surface, and so the sound itself is diluted and whatnot.
Psychoacoustically, the only difference is time.
Yep.
So a reverb is an echo that comes back to you within 150 milliseconds, and so your brain can't tell the difference between sound A and sound B. Whereas an echo is longer than 150 milliseconds, and so your brain can differentiate between the two sounds. So it's the latency between the send and the return. Plus, with reverb, there's other things that can be at play there, but it's mostly the time. It's that 150 millisecond latency of your brain.
I mean, I have you could probably create that echo sound with this plus the delay. But I have this specifically after my delay because remember, if you it's reverb aside, if you're gonna have a guitar sound that's delayed with like some kind of effect on it, generally speaking, overall, you want that whole sound to kind of reverberate. You don't want the delay sound. You don't want the reverb itself to come into the delay. You want the delay to the whole sound itself to come into the reverb, and so the reverb itself kind of overarches everything.
Mm-hmm.
So delay, like I said, used to be done with tape loop. So if you were running, you would literally just adjust the length of the delay by the length of the tape loop. And the other way that used to be done was, believe it or not, mercury delay lines, which were really long glass tubes with mercury in them. And you would you would send the note in at one side, and it would go down to the other end of the glass tube, bounce back, and that was your delay.
Okay.
You could have like up to 1 second mercury delay lines. Then reverb, of course, classically was done with slinky in a cardboard tube.
Spring right here. Spring reverb.
Spring reverb.
And the
Which is, I
sound,
mentioned this before, that's how you got in surf rock. You got that classic
yeah,
sound that was just
yeah.
kick the Fender reverb box and the
I'm
I
gonna
think
sensor
say
that's the side of the
Mercury
tube.
tube is absolutely the most metal way to get echo.
That's how RAM used to work in computers, was
Oh
mercury delay
God.
tube.
Damn.
You would
Oh,
send the bit down and you had 1 second before the bit came back, and if you didn't read it at exactly that time, it was gone.
thank God we're beyond that.
Yep.
Yeah, thank God we've like advanced. We've advanced beyond struggle.
It,
Um, so the layout of this pedal, since it's made by the same company, it's kind of similar. It has these things around with the big effect knob, um, in the middle, right there, like that. Here it has the reverberate. It has two presets. That's all these knob buttons here are for. Is just one preset, two preset. Um, I have the time here, so this is how long you want the reverberation to last. If I'm going to play a chord, it's going to really ring it out and let everything echo out and play out if I leave the time on. If I leave the time on all the way, it goes on forever if you really want it to. Or if I just want to get a
we
standard, just kind of, what?
in the business we call that the heat death of the universe reverb.
Yeah. And then, or if you just want like a standard like echo after you play a note or whatever, just kind of put that lower. You have the mix, how loud the reverb is, how present it is in your mix. If you want it, if you dial it at 12, you'll pretty much have a consistent reverb sound with the volume of your regular guitar. If you just again want a kind of a standard echo, maybe turn it down a bit. And then
So
these,
that goes to 12. It's too louder.
yeah, exactly. Um, and then it has all these different effects that you literally like edit one at a time with this knob here. Hold on. I got the pre-delay. So if I have it all the way down, this pre-delay, the reverb will come out instantaneously. It'll come out along with my sound. And usually that's probably how I'd want my reverb. But if I turn the pre-delay up, it's pre-delay. So it's going to delay that reverb. It's going to play my sound. And if I stop right away, it's not going to play the reverb right away. It's going to wait a second. There's a delay. And then there's the output, which is red. Which is the white. Red light is the white labels here. Output is how loud, the output. If I turn it up, it's going to be pretty loud. If I turn it down, it's going to be quieter. And then here it also has a diffuse setting, and it also has a rate setting, so you can add some modulation to your reverb as well. You can play around with those effects. And then you have bass and depth. So you can really get there are more complex reverb pedals out there that costs like $500 and whatnot, and they're like space reverbs and whatnot, and you can do a pretty good job with this. It just won't be as there's more knobs. It's more analog. I haven't read the whole manual on this pedal, so this is just the treble setting on the overall sound. I haven't experimented with these buttons too much, but I usually stick with that one. But maybe one of you could might be familiar with these labels.
I
Yeah.
HH MIDI and EXP. Yeah, I
I mean,
don't.
I know MIDI, but like I don't know how it's implemented in this pedal if I switch to it. So I'm gonna have to check that
Is
out.
that for like a external automation control?
I wonder, but there's not really like there's only an in and out. There's only in and out on this pedal.
Huh.
So
You can overlay MIDI on analog signals. I don't know if that's what's going on here, but
I mean, probably. I know my friend would when he would play live, he would ask me. He used a keyboard. I think he used a Moog, or however you pronounce it, synthesizer, and he would ask me to borrow this pedal, here and there.
Huh. Yeah, I don't even know on that one. Pedals are pedals are not my forte,
Yeah.
and it's actually pronounced Muji.
Really? Oh
No,
yes.
no.
I'm gonna strangle you. It's Moog.
I've heard it pronounced Muji. It's actually Mawag.
It's it's pronounced Muji, and by the way, those animated pictures you find online, those are Geifs.
You're right. Um, and then I guess we can like kind of talk about my amp, and I'll give you like a close up. I have two
Ooh.
amp heads. I have two amp heads,
Really,
and
really quick, Wyatt said something that I'm actually going to segue to later off something you said, Eddie, about the 150 millisecond delay. Says there's actual genres of rock and techno that are actually dangerous to listen to, such as speedcore and overtone, I think it's called. I am going to touch on that later.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
you were showing us the
Yes.
preamp.
The amps. I have two amp heads and I have two cabinets. Some amps you will get and you don't need an amp head and it's separate. It'll all come into one. Those are nice. This is again more of like if you just want. I wouldn't even say better. It's just more spread out. I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
Um,
Plus the benefit of that is you can take your
there's
amp
there's
head
there's
to
there's
the
more you can
concert.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have this little orange. It's called Micro Terror because it's so small compared to like a regular amp head. It's 20 watts. It's pretty powerful. The only complaints I have with this head is it's probably more of a practice amp. It's more of like if you're gonna be on the go, but you still want that power. You still of like a regular amp head. This can bring some power. And the overall sound you might not be able to get as clear, but it's really rocky. It's really you can get a really boosted, driven sound from this amp head. That's my major takeaway from that. And then I have the Marshall with this cabinet, and it's pretty cool. It has, if I want a clear sound, I'm probably going to use this over that. Especially since you have more knobs here, there's more you can control. I don't
Yeah.
use these knobs. This is if you have a boost pedal or whatever. I don't worry about these knobs here.
Well, that's in the little one. You're going to get more overdriven sound just because it can't put out the same amount of wattage. So as soon as you
Yeah,
start getting it a little bit too loud, it's going to naturally overdrive.
Orange
yeah,
historically is what you want to go for if you're looking for that psychedelic rock sound, whereas Marshall is what you want to go for if you're going just for the absolute balls to the wall heavy metal sound.
yeah.
And the Orange
And
reissue stuff is actually pretty good. The new Orange stuff.
yeah, Orange has been around. I've seen their product around, and they're always good. Um, my dad also built a speaker cabinet because he also like does music and stuff, and he built this.
Oh,
Um,
bitchin'.
yeah, he built this cabinet with two speakers. This side, I believe, is a British speaker, and this side is an American speaker. I forget the difference between the two, but the use in that is if you're recording, you can mic one side or the other, and you'll get a different sound depending on which speaker you want to focus on.
Okay.
And so yeah, that's my raw setup for now until I upgrade, but gets the job done.
Yeah, I mean,
Does not pay the bills, but
you've got a lot of utility there. Like I never had anywhere near that setup. I like how much control you have over everything.
so all
I,
so
I
what's
would have
about
killed for that
control.
gear when I was learning guitar. Just
Right?
the amount of flexibility in it.
Yeah, I've definitely come a long way, and I've had my like one pedal and that's it days. It's good. You need to have that stage. I feel like, or it's very important to have a stage like that because that's where you learn how to play. You're not depending
Mm-hmm.
on five different effects. You're depending on how your fingers sound when you play this note because there's nothing covering up the sound. It's just you and the note. You better, I still
Mm.
struggle with that, especially coming back to it and getting my muscle memory back and whatnot. But you need to make sure you have that precision early on. And once you come here, it'll be so much easier for you because you're playing the note clearly from the get-go, and
Yeah.
you'll be able to get that good sound because essentially you're sounding good no matter what if you're playing good on the guitar and you have
Yeah.
your effects.
And that's something where, I mean, if you guys think differently, absolutely chime in. I want to hear it. But because my philosophy has been, rewind. When I watch tutorials online of people showing, like, oh, yeah, if you want this sound, you got to use this gear. And very, very seldomly, let's take it from a synth side, because that's what I'm used to. You don't actually need that fucking synthesizer. If it's an FM synth, all FM synths are basically the same. You just need to know how to use the FM synth that you have to get that sound. I think it's more important to just stick to one tool, or it's better to have one tool that you know like the back of your hand rather than having like, oh, this is my synthesizer for when I'm doing psychedelic music. This is my synthesizer for when I'm doing heavy bass music. But they're all just the same type of synthesizer. It doesn't make sense to me.
It's
I mean,
it's just sound. It's just math.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like a synthesizer is just a keyboard, literal computer keyboard that activates something when you press a note.
Mm-hmm. Now,
I mean,
in the old
again,
days, sure, in the 60s that was true, where, you had the
yeah,
differences between tone wheel organs versus, additive synth organs and all of that stuff, and different brands and different models would have very different circuits in them. But since we went digital, it's just numbers. And
yeah,
the math, it's not even, the math itself is complicated, but it's not like brand B is using different math than brand A. They're all using the same math. They're just
Mm-hmm.
feeding
yeah,
different values into the presets. That's it.
yeah, yeah. Wyatt Coverdale says bye.
I see you, dude. Um, Actually, I just remembered I wanted to show what distortion does to a signal. So
Yes.
I have
Do we wanna? Yeah, go on.
I have right here. This is literally just putting a sine wave through everything, which is just one pure sound, and you can see that by the single orange line right there. That's literally just one frequency that you're hearing. I think in this case, that's A4, so you're just hearing one frequency, 440 times per second. Um, I'm only using this EQ as a graphic representation of where those frequencies lie. So I'm going to lower that down to right here.
And so from a technical scientific perspective, distortion is anything that is going to change that sound,
Mm-hmm.
which is everything is distortion. It's just a matter of getting the distortion that you want.
Exactly.
Be right back. Be right back.
Okay. So this is in bypass right now. We were hearing just the pure sound without the distortion applied. If I'm going to turn this down because this might end up being really loud. If we now pump this through distortion, you remember that one single vertical line you saw? It now turns into this, where it gets a lot of that extra noise up in the high end. Some of that's through shaping and whatnot, but it's creating extra frequencies. And that's where overdrive, to me, when I hear overdrive, I think a signal is getting so loud that is reaching the ceiling of what it can be and it's getting cut off, which creates other frequencies. Whereas in this sense, what this is doing is basically just adding a lot of high frequency content to it, extra harmonics.
So when we're talking about distortion on guitars, and whether we're talking about overdrive, distortion, or fuzz, we're really just talking about one thing, and that's clipping. But it's what's getting clipped and how it's getting clipped.
Mm-hmm.
So clipping is when it's like you said, it's when the wave hits the ceiling, and instead of continuing up, the sine wave gets sheared off, and it becomes like a square wave. And so square waves, square waves tend to sound like, to our ears, they tend to sound more like that buzzing high frequency stuff. But again, it's a matter of, you also get some other things like with real tubes where you get at higher frequencies you start to get ringing in the circuits, where higher frequencies you'll get this, literally it's like ringing a bell, and you'll see it on the circuit where it'll, like when you take the note away, it'll stay there longer than it should. And the higher you go, the more it tends to do that, which is why so many of these pedals on guitars have that brightness knob or treble knob or something to try to bring that down. Because if you want that really crunchy low end and you leave that ringing in there, when you hit the high note, it's gonna be painfully sharp.
You gotta sacrifice it, yeah. When you turn
Yeah.
the treble down, it makes it fuzzier.
Right, because on the fuzz, you really get the fuzz on the low end.
The fuzz on the low end, yeah. I
Yeah.
also wanted to mention on this one, I don't know if you can see it, but there's only one tube in there.
Oh shit, that looks like a really short tube. I'm used to them looking longer.
Yeah,
I
it can be
usually
big.
see them longer. Yeah, usually they'd probably be longer in this one, but yeah, I just wanted to
Mhm.
point that out.
That's cool. I didn't realize that was an actual tube. I've come from purely using a solid state. Fucking that's the term, right? Solid state amps?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never used tubes. They always seemed cool, but I also didn't like the idea of having to buy new tubes or breaking
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Well, and size of the tube is generally indicative of the amount of throughput it has in terms of current.
Naturally.
I like that throughput.
Throughput. Yeah, I mean this amp is from the 80s. So it's been around for a while. The
Oh
Marshall.
goddamn. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we actually had to get the tubes replaced one time, but like it lasts a while. It plays pretty well. You definitely could get a better amp now, probably, but like it's lasted a long time.
I feel like you can't even tell because Marshall just never changes up how they do things.
Yeah,
Nope.
probably because they got it perfect the first time, and they're like, why change it? Why fix it if it's not broken?
I mean, fair. They take that. Oh, so I have another, not really guitar story, but there was a philosophy from, fucking, what's the guitarist of Aerosmith? What's his name?
Oh,
Bon Jovi. Just kidding.
I can't think of his name right now, but guitarist of Aerosmith.
Hold on.
I'm not a huge Aerosmith fan, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I like some of their stuff. My sister really got the hots for them for a while.
Shit. List of Aerosmith members. Freaking Joe Perry.
Joe Perry, that's right.
Okay, there we go. His philosophy with amps was that he wanted an amp that sounded clear. He wanted his guitar to be the main sound. He wants you to be able to hear whether he's playing a Gibson or a Fender or whatever else he's playing, and the amp should just be totally perfectly transparent to let that sound through, which I never really thought of them that way, but then again, like I already established, I am the fucking cowboy of like fucking yeehaw at every stage of things. Let's see what I can make this do.
Well, you think about like early Aerosmith, so like Dream On. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really clean, which is actually the stuff I like.
Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to touch on this 150 millisecond thing, and this works because Wyatt's back, and he was the one that kind of brought this up. There are certain genres, electronic especially, like speedcore, where they're literally playing at such high BPMs that some people refer to it as extra tone, where it sounds like those drums are playing so fast it actually creates a new tone. And that is psychoacoustic because really the only difference between rhythm and pitch is our perception of it.
Mm.
That you could argue that sine wave that I was playing 440 times per second, that's just rhythm. It's just a really, really fast rhythm. Um, where if you play a uh, a drum, just any drum, you could take a bass drum sample, and if you play that so fast that it's hitting 440 times per second, doesn't matter about all those extra overtones or anything, that is going to sound like a 4 to your ears. That now becomes a
Hmm.
pitch and it is not rhythm anymore. And I forget, Adam Neely does a whole, he's fucking great channel. He did a whole video breaking down those kind of things, but I found that really interesting.
Hmm. Anton Erickson says, "Hey,
What is up with you too, my dude?
If you really want to bake your brain sometime, look up the theory of how 1-bit interfaces work. So 1-bit recorders, digital recorders.
what?"
And basically the idea is that your ears kind of suck at differentiating a lot of properties of sound. And so really all we need to do is figure out if the voltage on the line between the last sample and this sample increased. That's all we need to know. We don't need to know if it stayed the same. We don't need to know if it decreased. We just need to know whether or not it increased. And
Hmm.
so if it increased, that's a 1. If it didn't, that's a 0. But the advantage of that is that the electronics are so simple that then you can sample at like 5 megahertz as opposed to 192 kilohertz. And the amazing thing about it is the first time I heard one of these, and the sound design professor explained to me how it works. Like, that sounds like it's going to sound like crap. And I listened to it. I'm like, this is the most amazing thing I have ever heard.
Huh.
This is the cleanest,
Because
literally
on
the cleanest recording I have ever heard.
because on paper it might not sound it, but you're saying psychotic
Your
audio.
ears suck. Your ears
Yeah,
suck at
yeah.
differentiating between a lot of different things.
But they suck
And
so
it's
good.
almost like the logic that got applied to MP3 compression, except actually valid, which was sort of the logic behind MP3 compression. This is kind of true. Your brain really only perceives the top frequency and the bottom frequency. It doesn't really perceive much about what's in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why MP3s, the first thing they do is basically rip out all the mid range. But the way it was implemented was
Yeah.
entirely wrong. Whereas that's literally what this is doing, only it's doing it 5 million times a second, so your brain can't tell the difference.
Um, I
We
thought
gotta
that.
start wrapping up soon, by the way. Sorry.
Okay.
For,
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, fair. How much longer do you have until you got to take off?
I'm capping it at 10.
Okay. Um, Eddie, you and I can keep going if you want, or we might just wrap it up for the
Well,
night there.
yeah, I got to go at 10 too.
Okay.
I'm going to make a call.
All right. Perfectly fair. We can always do another of these in the future. Um, that is a total non sequitur, but do you remember last time when I was trying to phase invert the MP3 with the wave to show the difference
Hmm.
between the two, and they were different lengths, which I couldn't figure out. I made an, it was bothering me so much that I went into my DAW after the stream ended and just like, why the fuck did that happen? It shouldn't have happened. I had the same clip size. Interestingly enough, it appears as though I don't know if this is my DAW or just as a general rule, the wave files save more metadata to where when I imported it, that song was at 140 BPM and my blank project file was at 130. So when I
Oh,
dropped the wave into the blank project file, it read the metadata of the wave and said, oh, this was originally 140. Let me auto stretch it to 130. Whereas the MP3 did not have that metadata. So it just kept it the original length, which is why they were not lining up.
well,
Oh
yeah, if you
yeah.
think about it, you need it in a WAV file because the WAV file,
Has all the
you don't have you don't have any way of knowing that except the metadata in a WAV file. Whereas an MP3, that's kind of built into the encoding. You know what I mean?
It's like the difference between a Microsoft Word file and a PDF. No?
Sure.
I think I see where you're going with that analogy. I don't know those
Sort
file
of turn
types
your
well
head and
enough.
squint, maybe.
Yeah, not my wheelhouse, so I couldn't say. But
that was
Trying to think my way through that.
That was a bong hit.
that was a Joe Rogan moment.
Yeah.
From a non-dualist perspective, all files are PDFs.
Where's I hear DH coming. I think I now owe him money on that. I wasn't saying it like that, but also that I think we might actually owe DH royalty fees now on this stream.
Fuck.
From a non-dualist perspective, we all own non-dualists.
Ooh, fair. Yeah, he can't trademark
Copyright
that shit.
is meaningless from a non-dualist perspective. I'm just saying.
Fuck yeah.
From a non-dualist perspective, I own it.
All right. Well, I actually like that for a wrap up. I think I'm gonna let you guys go. Let you do the things that you gotta do. And so fucking yeah, thank you guys both for doing this. I might plan on doing another one of these in about 2 weeks. We'll see who wants to show up for that one, but both you guys are welcome if you want to be on.
Yep.
Awesome.
We can talk about parametric EQ the painful way.
Yeah, there's still so much to fucking cover.
Q. Just
ends.
get that letter Q burned into your brain right now because you're going to be hearing it a lot.
All right. Well, to everybody in chat, fucking appreciate you for being here and keep it classy. And to both you gentlemen as well, fucking thank you for being here. So, good night.
Thank you for having me on.